Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. I'm Gavin Baulch and my guest is Denise den-Bakker. Hello, Denise.
Hello, Gavin.
Now, how far have you travelled today to be with us?
I think it's about 50 kilometres or something like that.
All right, so not too far away.
No.
And you're living where now? In the city or rural?
Well, I'd like to be rural, but we're in Frankston, so yeah, southeast of Melbourne.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're enjoying it there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always liked the beach.
Okay, so where did you start, like, your school days?
I began in Springvale,
Yes.
St John Vianney's in Mulgrave. I think they called it Springvale North back then. And then went on to Colester for a couple of years, and then Mum and Dad bought a milk bar, leased a milk bar I should say, over in Mentone, and so I did the last 4 years of my schooling at Kilbreda College over there in Mentone.
Good. And a large family that you brought up with?
Yes, I'm the eldest of five, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. Yeah.
Good.
Happy.
And today you've got children of your own?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
Yeah.
how many?
We have 6. Technically 7. You know, we miscarried one quite a few years ago. So we have 4 girls and 2 boys.
Okay. Now, it's the Christmas season, and often people get their Christmas cards, and in it is the birth of Christ, but there's a baby. And often that stirs or triggers various personal reactions and responses. Whether you're religious or not, here is a mother and child. You see it everywhere. What do you think happens to women who have had a miscarriage or an abortion? Is it a trigger?
That's a really good question. I think often it is. I think it can be a really emotional time of year. Christmas lead up, I think, is longer, each year for commercial reasons, and I think that's good actually too. In some ways, it gives a lot of people time to prepare, and there can be quite a bit of preparation, especially if you've experienced a loss. Even just things like thinking about who you might encounter. Perhaps maybe newborn babies in the family. It can be quite awkward, very emotional. Bring back all those feelings, just even the sight of a little one. And depending, I suppose, issues too, like, was it long ago? Was it recent? It might be a little bit too hard for people to gather, and I think if you haven't been close to, loss, or possibly even a traumatic kind of loss of a little one, if you haven't been close to it, it's quite difficult, I think, for others to really, they might know, but it's difficult for them to actually understand what it might be like for someone going through that.
Now, do you think that's because there are taboos in our modern Western culture?
Yes.
So we don't talk about these things in a current moment because we never talked about them in a past moment with family. How do you see that being expressed?
Yeah, it's a good point because a lot of the time, things like this can't be spoken about often at the time when a loss occurs. So a lot of the, just say even the gatherings like we were talking about a moment ago, a lot of people might be experiencing, a lot of unresolved grief that others are not even aware of. So, if you're looking back at, say, the people who were around at the time, there might be a lot of, it could be a whole host of things. It might be sort of fear of a reaction. It could be, perhaps aggressive people close to them. Sort of lack of a partner, or if there is a partner, even lack of partner support. So there can be a whole host of reasons why someone hasn't been able to talk about something, and therefore, it can also continue, on into, from actually experiencing that to then becoming a parent later on and also feeling the same too.
Yes. So this inherent silence on certain things. For instance, we say in a social gathering we don't talk about politics or religion or all of those taboo subjects. So again, we come back to miscarriage or abortion as the taboo subjects. Do women talk together about these things when they're together?
Yes, yes and no. I think more than anything, it's opportunity, and I think it really, again, it has more to do with how a person is feeling with the people that they're with. The space that they're in, the person that they are with, that they actually feel that there is some sort of understanding, or there needs to be some common ground. I think before. We need to establish something along the lines of a friendship with some sort of common ground before we can actually reveal much of ourselves.
So just a broad brushstroke, does the medical profession as a whole allow these subjects to be raised in conversation?
It's quite difficult, really, because to be able to do that you need to have the language, and like those questions you've asked a moment ago, the silence and perhaps the lack of opportunity to bring something up, then it can be really difficult, because if you haven't had the practice, or if you haven't heard people talking about this kind of thing, and I think that's something in our culture that we're really experiencing a poverty in, it can be very difficult. You just don't know how to raise it. So it really depends upon, in some cases, there just being an actual space where you feel it's okay. Where can I talk about this? And I think that's what a lot of women experience. It's often only when women gather and you can talk about, sharing something like family, friends, children. How many children do you have? How many children have you had? It can be awkward at that very moment, because you'll see sometimes, the sadness in a person's face, or it might just be a sort of flash of remorse, or, guilt, or all kinds of things, awful memories of what could have been a whole lot of traumas surrounding that time of that loss.
All right, Denise, we'll come back in a moment to those questions. You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Denise den-Bakker. Denise, we were touching on the fact that there's a kind of taboo, there are silences, even when women get together to talk about life, on the issues of having had perhaps a recent or past abortion or miscarriage. And even in the medical world, when you go into hospital for these procedures or just for the checkup, the sentence, and so you've had a loss, you've lost a baby, it doesn't come out like that.
No. It's, I remember experiencing a miscarriage and encountering a number of medical people, medical professionals along the way, and one of those actually was a lady doctor I remember quite well. And I asked her at the time, would it be possible, to keep the remains? I was thinking about a memorial, and I had actually mentioned this to a priest at a local church, asking if that was possible. And he said yes, we have done a few of these, at times for, early pregnancy loss. And but yeah, with I remember encountering nurses, people preparing me along the way, and the first person, or the only person who mentioned anything about loss was the anaesthetist as I was about to go into the surgery room. So it felt very cold and lonely, and it surprised me. It was like no one had noticed that, I was losing, or I'd already lost an unborn, child that I was actually expecting. So for 10 weeks, you know, I thought I was having a baby. So it was really quite profound to be lying there and waiting for what seemed like silence. Yeah, and I thought that there would be more said. It was really quite stunning, the silence before going in.
So it's as if the reference to loss, the reference to trauma, the reference to death, these are just not used words at all.
No. What seemed to be emphasised, and I think it's still this way today, is just that it is a common thing for people to experience loss. And, you know, I think words or phrases like, you know, probably 1 in every 4 pregnancy ends, you know, in a miscarriage or some kind of loss. And they're words that we hear frequently. But there's a lot more to that loss, and it can almost sound glib, because for the person experiencing it, it doesn't matter that a lot of people are having this happen. What matters is this is happening to me and I'm losing a child that I expected. Yes.
So Denise, from your personal experience and what you're hearing from other women, you have taken up counselling to create a safe space for women to talk about these unspoken situations of grief and loss.
That is my hope. There are other people talking about this kind of loss in different kinds of ways, and I think pregnancy crisis centres are excellent places for these conversations to be able to begin, because a lot of people working in such centres are people who I think their greatest quality is the fact that they are being there, and rather than counselling, it's more a set of circumstances where you have people who share experiences, whether it be miscarriage or pregnancy loss of any kind, but in particular very early pregnancy loss that may not be so recognised in other ways. Sometimes people refer to pregnancy loss being recognised 20 weeks or beyond, and I think in law that's the case, but that's not my focus. What my area of concern is unmet needs for women, and that could be miscarriage, very early pregnancy loss, abortion. People experience these pregnancy losses usually surrounding some other kinds of trauma, and the loss is one part of what can be, you know, many layers of a trauma. And so finding a place to be able to talk about these things, it's not necessarily only a health need, so therefore it's not always recognised in its entirety.
So the need of a woman to bring some kind of conclusion to this traumatic experience, a memorial service or something where she can acknowledge that this life, as young as it is, particularly under 20 weeks when it's just ignored, you're creating opportunity for grieving to take place.
I think what I am hoping, you know, that people can sort of relate to is being able to talk about something, or having a place to talk about something where you have experienced a kind of loss, trauma, grief that isn't really being acknowledged in other places. And I think that is what needs to be understood, because we have a lot of talk about perinatal mental health, and there's a lot of talk about, you know, loss and grief and anxiety and counselling and all sorts of things, but not all the people in these processes actually understand the trauma that is involved for the people at these very early stages. So it's very hard then to find a way to have closure, and we need more spaces like this. So I think we need more, and we need more than pregnancy crisis centres. It's about acknowledging fetal loss, all kinds of fetal loss.
All right, well, let's come back to the fetal loss and what we might do about it. You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Denise den-Bakker. Denise, we're talking about bringing closure to a situation where the woman is asking for the remains, the child, this unborn, unknown person of 20 weeks and under. When you ask that question, remind us of the response that's been handed back.
Yeah, well, for myself, I've experienced just flat out no. That was some years ago. I've since been told that pathways don't exist for retrieving remains of babies. I've been told they are only curettings. And yeah, so it's been more than disappointing to hear these kind of responses, where I expected, particularly in this day and age with technology the way it is, I really did expect a much more understanding response than that, given that women give birth every day. I mean, it's not something new, and also given that psychology, perinatal mental health, all of these areas they're huge areas, and there's a lot of studies going on. So it sort of seems quite incredible to me that if we're not helping people towards closure and providing opportunities and pathways to help facilitate closure, for example, maybe just a brochure talking about remains that a person could take away at the time that, they've had to undergo a procedure, following their loss and traumatic loss, but something that they can take away and read later, because at the time you're feeling so very vulnerable, emotional. That's the nature of it. That's how your hormones are in your body at the time. For people who are already experiencing anxiety, depression and trauma, and possibly experiencing medication as well, it makes it even harder for them to be able to think clearly and to think through all the factors of what they're experiencing with this loss. So when it comes to the point where perhaps they've had a chance and their head has cleared a bit, the emotions have settled, it's often too late to ask that question. So if you can at least even have the thought there that, gee, that's something I might like to do, then it makes sense in a whole of health approach, because perinatal mental health surely has to be about looking at the closure aspect, helping people work through the trauma, the loss, and then if there can be some sort of closure and peace, like what we did, a little memorial service, not out of proportion to what had taken place, just quiet and private for those of us who knew, what had happened. And that brings enormous peace, but not everybody else has had that opportunity, I've discovered, and that brings a lot of regret.
Yes, it's that unspoken, that silence, that these are words that carry with it what others might see as baggage, and you're only passing grief and loss into this negative response to the world. Yes. In fact, sometimes a woman is just offered happy pills, is that right?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I know that's definitely the experience, and particularly people experiencing pain. It's very, very dangerous, because when you've got people with pre-existing medical conditions, or people who are having, experiencing medical conditions in the present, there's a masking of what is actually going on, and that can mask a whole host of things. That might be the mental health issues themselves, It can mean masking the ability to even speak. And if people have come from circumstances where it's hard to have a voice because of what's going on in their life, then it's going to be even more difficult when they're taking medications, which, while it might bring momentary help in coping, it's not going to help in the long term. It's very sad that in effect it's going to help maintain the poverty of circumstances.
Now, in that poverty of circumstances, just a simple brochure that would also and could be given to the partner?
Yes.
Because someone's not up to reading it at that moment?
Yes.
What have you in mind?
Well, this is the whole idea. I mean, you know, being part of possibly a pathway that could be developed. And I think, you know, perhaps a lot of women could, you know, make some inquiries if they're sort of suffering this sort of, you know, difficulty, or feeling like they haven't been heard, feeling possibly even like they've been ignored. And sometimes I think a lot of women might just have that nagging feeling inside of them that never goes away, thinking, I feel like I should have done more or could have done more. So there are things, you know, like consumer representation that people can do, or, as I'm hoping to do, you know, peer support, where, you know, we can offer an opportunity for people who've been through these kind of experiences, and instead of not knowing where to turn, we can think, well, you know, together I think we can brainstorm a few things. You know, women are very resourceful, and particularly mothers too. So a lot of other women have shared my interests. Women working in pregnancy centres too, they share the same desire to pass on, you know, this sort of understanding and empathy for others who are in it right now. So you don't really know where you can go with it.
All right. Where could they go?
Yeah. Well, it again, you know, different kind of experiences for different people, but I think a good starting point would be, you know, maybe like a Facebook page acknowledging all fetal loss, because the loss of an embryo or a fetus is still, you know, the baby. They're just, you know, terms for the baby at different ages. Yes. And sadly sometimes that only comes out later on too. Some of the safe places would be Abortion Grief Australia. They have a national line. Open Doors in Melbourne, also pregnancy assistance, and victims of abortion. You can Google all of those for a number.
Well, thank you, Denise, for that information. You've been watching Support Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye.